Okay, please, can you guys just settle down? So, thank you for coming out. How this night will progress is first, Alex and Jennifer from GETUP are going to talk to you. After that, Andre, Monroe, and Lisa from GetDown are going to talk to you. And after that, we're going to break into smaller discussion groups in this area, and we can have a question-answer session back and forth where all of them would be available at the same platform to answer whatever concerns, questions, things you want to get clarified, everything. And you guys can do this.
So thanks for coming, everyone. My name is Alex, and I'm a fifth-year PhD student, and I work on robotics.
And I'm Jennifer. I'm also a fifth-year PhD student in computer science. Yeah. And thank you to GSEG for organizing this and for everyone coming out.
So over the course of the past year, we and a lot of other GETUP members have been talking to grad students throughout SEAS and throughout the university about their experiences, and we just wanted to share some experience with you and to talk about why we think a union is best positioned to address the concerns that we all have. So we're going to open with two anonymous testimonials from SEAS grad students about some of the issues they've experienced. So I'll read the first one. Graduate students receive health insurance as part of their stipend. I thought the coverage was good, so I didn't read the fine print on this policy until I needed an ambulance ride, and then I couldn't get the full bill coverage. I think it's important for everyone to feel comfortable calling 911 in an emergency without having to worry about surprise bills that can easily run into the thousands of dollars. Union representation would make it easier to advocate for basic medical services like these, which cost the university very little and ensure that their student workers have the basic medical care they deserve.
So we have one more testimonial from another grad student in engineering. When I needed immediate mental health care, CAPS told me that they didn't have any therapists available for weeks or months. The only option they provided me was to see a therapist in training, which meant having all my sessions videotaped to be played back later for the therapist's advisor. I decided this was acceptable, but I shouldn't have had to make that choice. Excuse me one second. So these stories and the hundreds of others that we've listened to over the course of the last year are really what motivates us. I think that the goal of GETUP, my goal working with GETUP, is to improve work conditions for grad students both across the university and as part of SEAS in particular. And I think that the best way to accomplish that is to come together, to organize, and to negotiate for our rights as part of a union. So I wanted to start off with some information about what's going on in this whole process. A union is a group of employees who come together to have a say over their working environment. So our eventual goal as a union would be to negotiate a contract with the university. Right now, we don't have a written contract that actually stipulates our working conditions. And this contract can cover, and often does cover, wages, healthcare, and things like a fair grievance procedure that would just make our time at the university work better. The process, we're currently we're trying to decide if we want a union here at Penn, right? So we're sort of gauging support, and the next step within the next few months will be to hold an election that's administered by the National Labor Review Board. This is the government entity that takes care of National Labor Relations Board, sorry, that covers labor unions. So if we vote no, then that's the end of the story. If we vote yes, then we win a union, and the university is legally obligated to sit down and negotiate with us in good faith. Okay? So that's what we get from this process. The next step would be to negotiate this contract, right? So GETUP members would come together to decide once and for all on our platform what we want to demand out of the contract. We would elect representatives from within each school who would actually be working like one-on-one to decide on these negotiations. The negotiators would go to the table and try to come up with a contract with the university. And at that step, GETUP members would decide, do we want to ratify this contract? If yes, then we get this contract. If no, then we have to go back to the table. So this is sort of part of the sort of democratic process, like GETUP members decide on the contract or not, stuff like that. Something to note is that grad student unions are not a new idea. It's actually a very well-established idea. I mean, besides the whole history of labor unions in the United States in general, at public universities, grad student unions have existed for almost 50 years, first was in 1969. So at private universities, grad students have been trying to get the right to organize since about the 90s. And grad students at Penn, in fact, started the first GETUP campaign they were working in the early 2000s. They actually won an election according to the exit polls, but the Bush administration basically changed the law saying that grad students at private universities were not workers. So as a result of that campaign, even without an officially recognized union, the organization and the strength of the student body actually results in a number of benefits that we now take for granted, such as healthcare being included in everyone's funding packages across the university, as well as higher stipends. Now, recently, the rules changed again. Last summer, this National Labor Relations Board said that, oh no, grad students at private universities are workers, in fact. And so grad students at Penn decided that now is a good time. We should take advantage of this law and speak up for our rights. Once we decided to unionize, we adopted a written constitution outlining sort of the democratic principles of the organization. We also reached out to about 10 national unions before deciding to affiliate with the American Federation of Teachers, the AFT. Part of the reason why we decided to affiliate them was because they guaranteed us autonomy in our own local, which is just us, the graduate students at Penn. And so with help from them, but mostly with help from grad students like us across the university, we're organizing this campaign.
So I'll talk about some of the issues we've heard about. And a lot of the issues are not specific to School of Engineering, they're not specific to SAS, they're cross-cutting across the university. So just go through a few of them. One of the issues is stipend and benefits, which we all know about that. So in the first campaign, Jennifer mentioned there was a raise. They actually got a $5,000 raise for graduate student workers, and that's when we started getting health insurance. You may have heard recently that the university decided to cover half of our dental care, but there are more healthcare concerns, like the other half of the teeth, like the right side of my head. There are issues with mental health care. There are issues, especially with family and dependent care for student workers with spouses and children, and also with medical leave. I didn't know this. Apparently, if you go on medical leave, you lose your medical care, which doesn't make sense to me. But anyway, so one example, the graduate union at the University of Michigan has fought for full dental coverage and coverage for spouses and dependents under the same healthcare plan. Back to stipends, another example is the graduate student union at NYU, which in their contract stipulates a 12% stipend increase over 5 years. So the situation at Penn currently is from $24,000 to $37,000 a year with health care but not dental care or vision care. And so what we see in a possible future with the union is to negotiate to fill in those holes in health coverage, to raise stipends, to cover union dues and beyond that. And most importantly, this will all be written in a contract so the administration can't take things away at their will. That's something that we think might be extra critical in the next few years since since funding for scientific research seems to be on the chopping block. Okay, another issue. Yeah, thanks. Another issue we've heard about across the university is the grievance procedure. So when a student wants to file a grievance with the university, what we've heard is they basically send you a list of people to talk to, like disjointed people, but there's no accountability to make sure they actually respond in a timely manner, and everything is kind of confusing. So a union can help in several ways with the grievance procedure. Oh, and the other thing that you don't always get with the current procedure is anonymity. So there's several ways a union can help. First of all, in our contract, we can negotiate for a better and more streamlined procedure. Also, the union can provide an advocate to help, like to represent a student if they want someone to be with them as they go through the procedure. And we do have, just somewhat related to grievance procedures, we do have an existing student government structure with GAPSA and GSEG and MEGA and ESEGA and a whole bunch of other acronyms. They do advocate for students, and we don't want that to go away. But we think a union actually serves a slightly different function because a union has a real legally mandated seat at the table and has the power to bargain with the university.
So, of course, there are also, so Alex was talking about some concerns that are sort of cross-cutting throughout the university. There are also concerns that are fairly specific to grad students in engineering, right? We definitely have a higher proportion of international students than other schools. From our conversations with international students, the most frequent issue that comes up that has to do with visas. Important to note is that unionization would not and cannot change international students' visa or tax statuses. But what we can provide is information and support. So other unions have negotiated to have immigration lawyers or accountants on retainer, or require the administration to help pay like visa renewal fees and other fees that come along with that. Furthermore, since visa status is often tied to funding status, the union providing more job security, which is what Alex was talking about, can definitely help with that. Another concern that can be specific to engineering has to do with sort of working conditions. As far as I can tell, grad students in SEEDS do not have workers' comp right now, which should help cover medical expenses and leave time in the case of an accident at work. I think that's pretty egregious, especially since, as Alex said, during leaves of absence, grad students can lose health care. So workers' comp is definitely a concern. There are also less dangerous issues regarding facilities that I and lots of people that I've talked to have run into, like when the air conditioning in our office was like at 65 degrees every day, and it took about a year and a half for facilities to actually take the complaint seriously and replace a part, which actually fixed the problem. So in that situation, the union can provide support to be an advocate for me to get somebody to stand up and
graduate students can provide is protection and support to vulnerable students. Especially graduate workers who have encountered sexual harassment, international graduate workers, and graduate workers with families. And when these students have, when these protections are in place, this will help make STEM fields more inclusive and more diverse, which is a benefit for everyone. I'll also just touch on job security. I think most of us go through our programs with never having big problems with finding funding. But problems do arise when a grant runs out or an advisor leaves to go to another university or a student needs to switch advisors. And so what a union can negotiate for is clearer and guaranteed fallback options. So there's less of a burden on the graduate students and the professors to be scrambling for alternatives, and so that they can actually focus on the research that we all came here to do. So yeah, just briefly, some other issues the union could address are teaching guidelines, TA training, 401ks for graduate student workers, and transparency in general, which is not always the best with the university. And just to note again that this whole list of issues came from conversations with grad students across the university. Thank you. And you can look back 50 years through the history of grad student unions to show that unions can actually affect real change. Okay, so what are we going to do about it? We can address all of these issues with a legally binding employment contract. And it's the members of the union who will decide what goes into the contract. But I have a list of some things that we've already heard that we want to include, and things we've seen in other contracts that grad student unions have negotiated. The first thing that we see in a lot of other contracts is a no harm clause. We're proposing to add a clause to the constitution of GETUP itself that says that we cannot ratify any contract in which we'll make less money or benefits than what we currently have. And so this is a short way to put it. We want a contract to keep what we have, especially the good things that we have, and fix the problems. A contract is, it's like an insurance policy. It'll get us what we need, and it'll have that written down so that future grad students will have the benefits as well. One thing we definitely want to keep is flexibility for working hours. And to tie into that, one thing to fix is if we have dental coverage, then we don't have to spend our working hours worried about finding money for teeth cleaning. We can focus on work. And when these things are just taken care of, when we can take them for granted, it helps us focus on work. It helps us in our relationships with PIs and advisors because they can be focused on work and not funding. And a contract promotes clarity and transparency from the university about their procedures and how to resolve issues. Just to note that the contract can be flexible and have provisions that vary from school to school. And all the issues in the contract are voted on democratically by the union membership. The platform that we negotiate on, the representatives from within the union from each school, and the full contract is brought back to the membership for ratification before it goes into effect. So we're not going to vote for a contract that we don't like.
One concern that we've heard brought up from grad students in Cs is how we will be represented within the larger context of the other union members, the staffs, and the other departments. So we've talked about that we're going to be electing representatives from each school to be represented equally when we're bargaining. But it's also worthwhile to note that ultimately we have more in common with grad students from other schools than we have different. I mean, besides the cross-cutting issues, it's worth noting that there are many departments in the School of Arts and Sciences and BGS, Biomedical Graduate Studies, that work in lab. Not like we're totally isolated. In fact, from this process, like I think a lot of us have learned that we have a lot more in common with grad students from other schools than we thought. the fundamental goal is not to take away resources from smaller groups, or even to equalize resources. It's to like stand together to build all these things up.
Sure. Before concluding, we just wanted to take a minute and respond to suggestions offered by GETDN based on what we've read on their website as alternatives to a union. First of all, we see that they agree with us on many of the issues that affect graduate student workers, and that's good. We're glad to agree that issues such as lack of a neutral grievance procedure and workers' comp are problems. Unfortunately, it seems to us that the alternative they propose, an employer-sponsored union substitute, is not actually legal under labor law, and that would have to be addressed. And there are other suggestions to modify the ballot at the NLRB election to add a ballot question about which schools should be in the bargaining unit. That's not how the election works, so that is not possible. So just, again, we agree that these issues are real and need to be addressed, and we believe that the tried and tested way to address these concerns is through forming a union. And to conclude, a union for us, a union is about getting involved, getting your voice heard, making sure engineers have a seat at the table. And we'll be breaking into small groups eventually, and we're happy to answer any questions you have. We have some facts and figures to hand out, I think. And you can approach anyone you see wearing one of these GETUP shirts.
Yep, want to stand up.
Hi. And we're excited to be part of this national movement to form grad student unions.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, that does look like that. I have it.
See, all you need to do is break it.
It's like a foot.
Download it. You just need to
Break
break
the
the
channel.
cable. Yeah, just break the cable. And I'm sure that's what happens to the cables the person's trying.
He said what was saying you're going to get that, but
It's such a
I don't know why he said it. But is this in the GETDN?
That's pretty magenta to me. I think the C.
Color is subjective, guys.
Well, that dress, what was that? That dress was really nice.
Color is subjective. Let us measure the wavelength. All you did is
Yeah, thanks. If you could take that, thanks. Probably the power.
I think you just got to see the color of wine.
It's part of my computer. Can you get it into mine?
a tour de force.
It's difficult. You know, it's a tough process. the most difficult part is that there's a lack of clarity overall. I think there's a lack of clarity in the way that some contracts are written, and I think there may be a deliberate lack of clarity in the way that GETUP is presenting some issues and even presenting on these topics. So one of the things that this allows, this kind of broad discussion of issues without real focus on solutions, is it allows a lot of pandering to different groups without seeming contradictory. So it allows people to meet with one group and try to persuade their leadership and then have a membership vote, and then go to another group and so on, and talk about points that are very different and promise that all of these different points will still be included in one final contract. And then you look at real contracts and you realize it's not really the case. So the next big thing is a point that's very recently been diminished a lot and almost, I don't say intentionally, but it's definitely been diminished, is the involvement of AFT in these unions. So when the whole thing started, the GETUP website was hosted on the AFT website. It was a subdomain, or it was getup.aft.org, and they've since moved to their own website. They've taken the affiliate link off the website and hidden it between in a submenu. And the reason for that is the AFT controls a lot of what is happening. They control a lot of what's happening behind the scenes. So AFT pays for the office that GETUP currently has. AFT employs staff at that office. AFT is paying for happy hours that GETUP hosts. And there's a lot of involvement of AFT, a lot of monetary investment because of what they hope to get afterwards. They hope to reap some rewards here. Otherwise, they wouldn't be making these investments. I want to give some examples of, very briefly, examples of how facts can be twisted to reflect, for example, the benefit of the AFT in saying they've won many things or they've achieved many things while not really achieving those things. The first example is they talk a lot about the dental policy. And one school where AFT is often referenced is NYU. So AFT won free dental at NYU. But what's not discussed is that at NYU, that dental policy is worse in every category than Penn's $200 policy. And if Penn were to renegotiate that insurance policy, raise deductibles, lower coverages, I'm sure they could also get it for free. So it's not the fact that it's free. We need to consider the feasibility, consider the coverage, and consider the small details that don't sound so good on paper when you say, we want a free union. The next related point is, some of you might know, at Cornell there was a very recent vote about this whole union thing, and they didn't do so well. And within the CGSU, which is Cornell's union body, a group called CGSU Rank and File came out. And these are all pro-union members that came out to discuss why it didn't go so well. And one of their top concerns was they wanted more autonomy from the AFT. They felt that the AFT was stifling their ability to communicate with each other in forming their union, and instead directing exactly how it would go. And to give you an idea of how much direction AFT is giving, at the conclusion of GETUP's presentation, they said that the ability to vote department by department to be in or out of the bargaining unit is not how the election works. But in fact, the reason why it's not how this election works is because AFT specifically does not allow it. It's not the fact that this election couldn't be that way. On top of that, I see GETUP shaking their heads. Back in 2004, when this thing was first voted on, C's was not part of the bargaining unit. So the department was out in 2004. So, again, I think it's really important to really consider the feasibility and the truth of a lot of these claims. The last thing I want to talk about real quick before I hand it off for some real visual facts is that we already have a lot of freebies. And I think it's difficult to quantify just how many we have until you consider the freedoms that we have as engineering students. So for example, if I come in on a weekend and I work Saturday and Sunday because there's some time-sensitive experiment to set up, and I have nothing left to do on Monday, I cannot come to lab. That can be my weekend. But technically, I only have 2 weeks of vacation, of paid vacation per year. So technically, I would have to file and take a vacation day on that Monday. But thankfully, in engineering, that's a freebie we have, an unspoken freebie. And in fact, I'm sure a lot of us here can say that there's many days where we come in, halfway through the day or leave early and so on. And it's a freebie that's basically overlooked. On the other hand, if in this negotiation between the union and Penn, despite this do no harm clause, because that's already in our contract, it's already something that we have to adhere to. If Penn said, well, if you want to trade this freebie for another one, like a worse dental insurance policy, we can make you stick to this vacation day policy. And that would mean if we took, let's say, 2 days before Christmas and 3 days after that we could get off, we'd be left with only 5 days off during the rest of the year. So, 1 day every 2 months we'd be able to spend at home on a weekday. So, GETUP's response to this is, well, why not make Penn put in their contract that you're allowed to stay home for these days at your discretion, at the discretion of your advisor. And the reality is that the freebies we have are so good that it wouldn't make sense to put in a contract. We have 40, 50 days off a year. A lot of this stuff is just, it just does not make sense to discuss as we need a contract to enforce these things. The last thing is the limitations of this policy. So AFT is going on about how they want to change the way IP laws are handled at Penn. The way research should not belong to Penn, the researcher should belong to everyone for free. And I think that if GETUP members sincerely believe that the union will be able to change America's IP laws, they can go ahead and try. There's also some other limitations like the ability for the union to influence how different departments in a university can change the graduation requirements, for example. So one of the big concerns the English or the humanities departments have is their deans change so quickly that every time anyone comes in, the graduation requirements change, and all the about to graduate students, don't get the best deal. However, in most contracts, the university is given full control over all academic affairs. And so I would argue that graduation requirements are an academic affair, and indeed that's how it's been interpreted in the vast majority of these contracts. So with that said, I'm going to hand it off to the presentation here. Thanks so much for listening, and here's Monroe and Lisa.
Thank you guys very much. GETUP had a really good point when they started. One of the things that they said was on the actual ballot itself, you can't have 2 questions. They're absolutely correct, and this is set by the NRLB. But what you can do is when you file a petition, you can actually say who is going to actually be in your bargaining unit. So we were misinformed in the beginning, but what we really want is we want people to have a choice. We recognize where their heart is, and we really appreciate that. But we feel that there is a better way forward. And so we want to actually give people a choice. Do you want to actually be in this bargaining unit after you've been informed? And we'll do our best to be very concise and quick here. If you want to, you should have a choice. And that's all we ask. If everyone wants to be in it before you do this bargaining unit, because there's some locking in that goes on, but if they do, we're satisfied. But if they don't, we believe they should have that choice. So these are your rights. You have the right to be informed. You have the right to vote. We ask that you do vote. So many important issues have been raised. However, you must be informed and determine the absolute best course of action. We should identify the resources that currently exist and how well we meet the needs that have been raised, as well as identify where infrastructure can use improvement. So we believe that this system can certainly be improved, as was stated, but we believe that a graduate union that encapsulates all schools and departments is a very blunt, ineffective, and possibly harmful tool. And we have the right to choose if we want to be represented by this up front. So we're asking, why is the union not the best way to affect change? We're going to present 2 different perspectives, from the economic infeasibility to the issues that a graduate union could cause. And we're going to do our best to do this in a very citation, fact-based manner. So let's start with the economics. So on the GETUP website, they lay out a plan for how they actually expect to move the average of graduate students. They realize that some of the grad students could be priced out of existence, but they say if Penn has a $10.7 billion endowment, that shouldn't happen. So we want to ask ourselves some questions. First, how does Penn's economic structure actually work? And is it a sustainable source for increasing graduate funds? Where is that? In the financial or other union demands are not met, in that case, what is the mechanism other than strikes? You don't want to do that for the no harm clause. Given that the lowest segment is above the minimum wage, are there other systemic issues that we could address to actually raise that bar across departments? So diving quickly into the economic ecosystem. So here at the bottom here, we have this webpage by Penn that shows how their endowments are broken down. So there's private donations and there's investments. Private donations come from alumni and whoever. They're earmarked for very specific things. You can't use that part of the endowment without their express permission. The investments, however, are a little bit more lucrative, but they're tied up and they're used every year. 10.6 of that, if you go to this page, is used to pay for all the different things. So a question we have to ask ourselves is, so there's the bank account, right? Some of that's tied up and it's being used in a particular way, but what are the sources of income, right? Where's the flexibility here? So if you actually look at the consistent income for the administration, you have tuition, right? But education is a product, so there's an optimal price point. So if you change that too much, you could price yourself out of students. There's faculty grants. So every department has, faculty and they write their grants. They have some that's used for stipends, part of that's used for research, and then the other part is overhead, which goes to the school, and some of that goes to the administration. And it's different across the 12 schools. Some more leverage is in student fellowships. So that has stipends, school administration. So a union can only touch your stipend, right? And in the ecosystem, this is going to be offloaded on the respective schools, possibly wounding the financially smaller schools. So how do we think that this is actually the case? So if you actually think about it, graduate students can be considered assets of their respective schools. We define these assets by being acquired for the purpose of increasing the profitability and quality of the respective school. So you can think of research equipment, really expensive robots, rented lab space, faculty, as well as graduate students. All these things schools are able to acquire, right? In each of these examples, it's clear that the burden of maintenance and care is placed squarely on the school. Hence, if the graduate student assets were to become untenable, the burden would certainly be on the school as well. So because schools don't have equal resources, certain schools would be financially burdened and perhaps destroyed, requiring GETUP AFT to change the strategy to average stipends. So, history of the AFT, Andre spent some time on this, so we won't go too much into detail, but please do your own research. That's all we ask. Look it up. Do your own research. So what do unions do when they're not acknowledged or given what they deserve? You have to strike. You go, not everybody. Well, NYU striked, and they're like a good example for moving forward what our union could look like. They threatened to strike in 2015, and even GETUP has performed a strike, a 2-day strike in February of 2004. So we've discussed some of the challenges a union presents economically. Now let's take a look at some of the issues that make up the union platform. We'll hand it off to Lisa.
Thank you. So issues. These are the issues that GETUP has put on their page. And so it's important to note, as GETUP noted, that these issues come from conversations with graduate students. This is not a binding set of issues that could be bargained for. So after an election happens, if the vote goes yes, then a bargaining survey is sent out, then the issues are made, and then they're prioritized. So just because there's a lot of rhetoric around these issues doesn't necessarily mean that this is the exact list that would be in. But because there's a lot of rhetoric about this, we'd like to show contract comparisons, because that's one way to determine if Penn holds up well to a union contract with benefits. So for healthcare, both NYU and Penn PhD students have a free healthcare plan. Distinction with NYU is that the free comprehensive plan for PhD students is actually different than the subsidized cost plan that master's students can buy. If you want to look at the cost of these plans, out-of-pocket costs at Penn are lower in-network and out-of-network dramatically than the out-of-pocket costs at NYU in their comprehensive and basic health insurance plan. Looking at emergency care, Penn and NYU are about the same. To make a comment on the ambulance ride, the only way you can get hit with a charge that high is if one, the ambulance was out of network, and two, if negotiations really went that horribly on the recognized cost. So an ambulance ride in network is covered at Penn. If we look at primary care, they're about the same. NYU, you get hit with a copay. And then if you look at leave of absence, at Penn you can purchase a continuation plan, and it's difficult, right, with the wording of semesters and when you take off. In the NYU from looking at their website, from what it seems on their health plan, you can also purchase a continuation plan. The only thing under leave of absence in the NYU contract is about if you go on a leave of absence for union-related business, you can still stay on pay and health care. And then looking at mental health, this is an area that can always be improved upon, and no university does it perfectly. But if you look at Penn and you look at NYU, they both have these student health centers where they can do short-term psychotherapy, they can do talking. When CAPS is filled, there's phone numbers, and for out-of-network, if you were to go outside and do like in-network outside, $10 copay, out-of-network outside, 70% of the charge will be covered by your insurance, and it's very similar at NYU. So while these things could be improved, if you look at what the contract's actually negotiated, we're already right there. If you talk about funding, stipends in engineering at Penn are set by the department chair and then approved by the administration. We can only show BGS data because Penn administration won't give us these data because they've been asked not to interfere at all with this. And so we can't give you the C's data to show the stipend increases. But if you want to look at the comparing stipends between the NYU contract, we're above the NYU contract's stipend. And if you look at Temple, I caution you with the 18,000 number, that's a minimum number. So if GETUP wanted to equalize stipends, they could set a minimum. And you can actually make more than that. But if the goal is to guarantee and lock in your rate, you're not guaranteed to lock in the rate that you're making. You might just guarantee to lock in the minimum. And then if we want to compare the dental plan, you can see restorative care, oral surgery. NYU covers significantly less than Penn covers. And our dentists are certified over students in training. And so for that $200 per year, you get a much better plan. Looking at vision, it's really not a conversation because NYU and Penn have nearly identical vision plans. If you're over the age of 19 at NYU, you don't get contacts and glasses for free. And then looking at family and dependent care, GETUP wants to claim credit for this. Possibly they do have credit for the $1 million. I don't know if that's them or it was already in the works. But Penn put aside $1 million for dependent health care. NYU's contract won $200,000. So I'll let you fill in the price difference and the difference between bargaining and what Penn offers us. And so then the issue, so workers' compensation. This is something we actually need. We don't have it right now, and it's because we fall into a loophole. Before August, we weren't employees. Workers' compensation is for employees. So this is something that we should address the university, and we can address that before we go to unionization ideas. And intellectual property, the union can't touch it under the Bayh-Dole Act. The most they did in NYU is appropriate acknowledgement for work is addressed in the contract. So you get a citation on the paper, you get your name on the paper, but it's missing in every other union contract because of this act. And then the grievance procedure at Penn definitely could use some improvement. And so right now, you just go to your immediate supervisor, or you go to this chain of hierarchy, or you can contact the ombudsman. The NYU contract is really laid out in what you have to do. So within 15 days of this grievance, you can't take time to think about it. You have to act within 15 days, or else the grievance goes away. You go and you present this to the designated people, and then you wait 10 days to see if they respond and address it. And if not, you can go to the department chair. And if that doesn't address it, you can go to the provost to look for solutions. And if that doesn't address it, you can go to this American Association of Arbitration, which will step in. And then whatever they rule is final and binding for any of the grievance under that. And this applies to grievances within the contract. There's specific wording in it. But this is something that could be improved, but it really will depersonalize the grievance procedure by putting in all these little timelines. And if you wait 15 days because you were traumatized, you lose the chance to report. So
speaking to some of the international students, so the International House is here, 16 full-time staff, comprehensive immigration status, and legal services are also provided by GAPS in the undergraduate assembly. So one thing, the most important thing, and I know because I have many international students in my lab, is getting your visa. The fact is, the union can't bargain on visa issues because this is even out of the university's control. So even in like the NYU contract, it was devoid of any issues pertaining to international students. We'll make these slides available, but we have like a list of current resources that are even available. So, you know, I want to make a quick list. There's a lot of words, but hit the red. So how can this affect you, right? There are working hour restrictions, vacation restrictions. You have to punch your clock, and we hope that there's a no strike, no lockout clause. But, you know, that's your mechanism of making things happen. And there's even going to be changes in tax filing if this comes about. And then, you know, at present, no one can make promises on the things on the right-hand side, like how your wages will actually change, what your union dues will actually be, and even these other things on this list. You can't say anything until the contract exists. So these are uncertainties, and you should be concerned about that. So your relationship with your advisor will change. So there was a couple of papers that were really put out a lot about talking about how they wouldn't change. But if you actually look at some of the end of these, when they were peer reviewed, they said, hey, you didn't do any of these in actual STEM, you know, environments. And so they're like, these are areas for future studies. So personally, I'd like to let some other universities go first. And then maybe if everything works out, we'll consider it. But for now, hey, like, we're not ready for this. And there's also some extreme examples how a union actually conflicted with the way the class structure and everything actually work. There are very extreme examples here, but you know, a test, right? How if you don't like anything, then you can affect it. And so if one person doesn't like how a test was, and everyone else just wanted to finish and get rid of this class, you know, you have this issue. So again, do your own research. So in conclusion, we believe that this burden is going to be offloaded on the schools, and it's going to be potentially detrimental to the existing programs. And we have a lot of freedom already that is brought about by not being under contract. You know, your advisor may not actually say, how many days were you away? You know, if you were in a good relationship and you finished your work, you can have a vacation, and it's not, you know, you're not filling in a tick in a box. So we believe that GETUP AFT should first determine who wants to be a part of their bargaining unit. That's all we ask. And if this is a fair determination, then proceed. So something you should know, if there is a union and it is voted in, and you're part of that bargaining unit, dues can be collected within 30 days of the union security agreement. This is on the NRLB website. So you'll be paying dues really soon. So can we talk about alternatives that meet needs more precisely? We put up an idea on our website, but it's nowhere binding. We thought of this ourselves, and who are we, right? We need to have a bigger conversation between students and administration. What's actually feasible? Maybe what we have was a pie in the sky, but maybe we can find alternatives that are internal to Penn that could actually meet the needs of everyone involved. So can we talk? So here's a process for RLB, but if you have any questions, we'll be happy to answer them. And we have a petition too. If you want to sign the petition, please stop by. Myself, Lisa, Andre will get you a part of it. Thank you very much.
So if anyone would like to ask questions openly,